So what is the position on the use of hydroxychloroquine in the treatment of COVID-19 patients? This is Mazen Infectious Disease and Critical Care Medicine, and today is the 20th of March 2020. What we know about chloroquine in COVID-19 is coming from Chinese clinical studies that showed some positive effects in terms of outcome in approximately 100 SARS coronavirus 2 infected patients. I don't have an access to the details of this study, so I cannot comment on the quality or the outcome. What we know is coming from a study that was published online by the International Journal of Antimicrobial Agents on March 17, 2020. They looked at the hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin as a treatment option for patients with COVID-19. The way they designed the study is an open-label, non-randomized clinical trial with external controls. So you can imagine the limitations of the study. They included relatively small number of patients, total of 32 patients with COVID-19 infections. They were followed for at least 6 days on a daily basis with PCR on nasopharyngeal swabs. 6 patients dropped out of the hydroxychloroquine arm, so they ended up having 20 patients compared to 16 patients in the control arm. The number of patients who were negative, who had negative PCR on day number 6 was 14 out of 20 in the hydroxychloroquine arm, which is 70% of the patients, compared to 2 out of 16 in the control arm, which is 12.5%. The difference between the two groups is statistically significant. So they concluded that hydroxychloroquine treatment is significantly associated with viral load reduction in COVID-19 patients. And then they looked at those patients who had azithromycin in combination with hydroxychloroquine, and they found 6 patients were treated with this combination, compared to 14 patients with hydroxychloroquine alone, and the controls are the same, total of 16 patients. 8 out of 14 patients had negative PCR on day number 6 in the hydroxychloroquine only arm, which is 57.1. All patients in the hydroxychloroquine in combination with azithromycin arm had negative PCR on day number 6, and the control is still 12.5%. So the differences among these 3 groups were statistically significant. And they concluded that the effect was even more pronounced when hydroxychloroquine was in combination with azithromycin. And we can see the results of this study also graphically on this graph here, where the black line is the controls, the blue is the hydroxychloroquine arm, and the green is the combination between hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. You can see that they start getting separated on day number 3 with statistical significance. You can see the p-value here is 0.002, and that remained in effect for the remaining of the study. On day number 6, as you see, all patients in the combination group had negative PCR, and 57% of the patients in the hydroxychloroquine arm had a negative PCR, compared to only 12.5% in the control arm. The other study that is available is also a study looking at in vitro antiviral activity, but also looked at optimized dosing design of the medication. And it showed that Both chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine were found to decrease the viral replication in concentration-dependent manner. The higher the concentration of the medication, the higher killing effect, or the lower the viral replication. And they found that the hydroxychloroquine is more potent than chloroquine in this study. So the half maximal effective concentration was much lower for the hydroxychloroquine compared to chloroquine. Based on this study, they were able to determine that a dose of 400 milligrams of hydroxychloroquine given twice daily on the first day, followed by 200 milligrams twice daily for 4 days, is recommended for SARS coronavirus 2 infection. Now, the question would be how we're going to use this medication. Well, the data that is presented is very limited. We don't have any clinical data in this regard. All what we have is that this medication is able to decrease the viral load in those patients. And we have the initial positive effects of the Chinese studies. Well, given the magnitude of the pandemic and the high mortality rate, relatively speaking, with the high severity of illness, I think it is very reasonable to consider using this medication in severe cases, putting in mind the safety profile of the medication, the interaction with other medications, and precautions associated with this medication, such as the prolongation of the QT interval and the deficiency of G6PD patients if we have one of those patients. Now, in terms of non-severe cases, it would really depend on the supply. The supply is limited of the hydroxychloroquine. Of course, it is FDA approved for malaria and rheumatoid arthritis, so it is available. However, the supply may not be enough to cover all patients. So we'll be looking at the non-severe cases based on how much supply do we have in the country. And in terms of prevention, we don't have enough data, or we don't have any data to suggest that hydroxychloroquine would be recommended for prevention. However, it may make some sense. That's why there is an ongoing study that is an open data clinical trial for COVID-19 prevention, and you can sign up for this study if you want. So I hope everyone stay safe and thank you very much for listening.